Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Julia Clift. Hey, Julia, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I wanted to start by sharing some work of yours. Right, there we go. So I went online and I chose a couple of images, pieces that I thought were sort of outstanding. And I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about each one of these. And this one in particular, um, I chose this because it really works on the colors and the geometry of this. It just all sort of clicks. My eyes going in and out of this picture, but I am mystified uh, about the references
Mm.
that you have in all of this. So can you just tell me a little bit about this piece?
Sure. This piece is called Under Construction. And like a lot of my work, it started with a collage that I made. And the materials that I use in the collage are snapshots that I've taken from different places where I've lived. A
Hmm,
lot of the imagery in here is from Central Florida, where I grew up. It's a place that I'm really fascinated by. Um, But then also there's imagery from where I currently live, which is the Philly area. Um, and then something that I tried in this painting for the first time, this was the first painting where I tried this out, is I took colors from actual flowers in my neighborhood. Like I went outside with a box of color aid paper and like
hmm.
matched certain colors and then came back into the studio, mixed those colors, like matched them precisely, painted sheets of paper with those colors,
Hmm,
and then used that in the collage material.
hmm.
So the a lot of the shades of purple and yellow and pinks in these are like the exact shades of different colors of plants
Hmm.
um, in like the Philly area. And what I think is really interesting is how in the paintings they feel really unnatural and almost like commercial or like advertising or like tacky colors, but
Okay.
they're like they're actually like lifted directly out of nature. And so I
So
think
it's
that's
photographs from
great.
Florida using a Philly color
Yeah, but some of the colors are Florida colors, right?
palette. Okay.
Like the colors of the buildings were actually the colors of the buildings. There's a little strip of sunset in there.
Okay.
Those are colors that are actually in the photograph, but
So
it's mixed in. It's all
what was the
mixed in together.
motivation behind using those found colors?
I was interested in the associations of color. I'm really interested in how like what I think of as Home Depot orange is also like the color of sunsets and is also like the color of fire, right? So a lot
Hmm.
of times like I'll see certain colors and I'll think, oh, it's like such like a natural or tacky color, but it lives in nature. And so
Right.
I think that's sort of funny and interesting.
So how much of this is really just a setup for color experimentation?
That's a good question. I mean, I think most of my paintings are like somewhere in between like super formal. Like I'm just really interested in like formal experimentation and also conceptual, like trying to work out ideas in my head. I really think they're like kind of in between those things.
Hmm. It's quite interesting. So I also chose this piece. Again, the way that you're doing the layering and sort of interlocking the images, it's quite good because you can't really tell what's in front, what's in back. Um, I just sort of enjoy that, and I'm also thrilled about the idea that you have these tiny little pieces that allow people to start. Like that that's a palm tree in the bottom corner. I think a lot of people will start there and then sort of work their way in. But it again, I'm still trying to work through a storyline on these. Am I just wasting my time on that, or is it just so down there that I just need more time, maybe?
No, I don't think that they're not necessarily narrative, like, you know, they're depicting a literal sequence of events or anything like that. but I do think that there's ideas embedded in them that can be lifted out.
That's what I mean by storyline. Not necessarily like, Billy went to the store, but more like what is your
What's
thinking
it?
process through this?
Yeah.
Because I do see these as, a certain chunk of your time of you thinking through time. So
Hmm.
it makes me wonder about all these little pieces. One of the things I thought was fascinating was I see some shapes or some some colors and shapes that then show up in other works.
Hmm.
So you're sort of reusing those. So that to me makes me think like, oh, this is an important shape. I should remember this because it does something. Again, am I
Hmm.
overthinking this, or is it just that?
No, no, I don't think you are overthinking it. I mean, a lot of the shapes that I'm interested in are like shapes that are so like commonplace in like our everyday surroundings that we don't even notice them. Um, but like I want to notice them, if that
Yeah, I
makes
mean that's
sense.
such an artist thing to say. It's
Yeah,
perfect, right?
yeah,
Like I'm
yeah.
fascinated by that. I just want to do it. And so, like on this piece, I saw in the I'm pointing at the screen like an idiot. Um, there's some shapes there in like they almost look like windows that then show
Yeah.
up in this. These are works on paper pieces. So
Yep.
that made me think like, oh, there's something going on here.
They
Um,
are. That's really cool that you picked up on that. They are. They're connected. Yeah.
okay.
It's interesting. So the shapes in the painting originally, that's actually the first time that I used that shape,
Mm,
the rectangle with the rounded corners. And
hmm.
at first I was like just thinking about the ubiquity of that shape in our everyday lives, like,
Hmm.
credit cards, phones, like just
Right. Yeah.
everything is like, just like this rectangle with rounded corners. It's just like so ubiquitous. And um and so at first I was thinking of them like credit cards because I was thinking a lot about like I'm thinking a lot about it sounds like cheesy or something, but I think a lot about consumer culture and capitalism and all those things. And so I was thinking about them like credit cards. And then when I painted them in, like they're sort of zooming away from me, I was like, oh, they look like train windows,
Mm,
and there's all of these other markers in the paintings of transportation and movement. And so it was like, okay, yeah, they're kind of like windows, not credit cards. And so, and also with the color, it was almost like a somebody had come into the studio once and said that it reminded her of a specific moment of like riding the L with
mm,
like the
hmm.
sun hitting the windows at a certain slant, and it made the colors kind of glow on the windows. And I was like, yeah, that's perfect.
Hmm. Well, I
But
think that that's one of the things that I was fascinated by your work because you do leave a lot of wiggle room for interpretation. So you're pinning it down, but at the same time you're unpinning it. You know what I'm saying? Like it
yeah,
allows for people to come in and say, "Oh, well, I see train windows," and you're like, "Okay, train windows." And I
yeah,
see a lot of contemporary art that's starting to move in that direction. It's a different kind of a relationship with the viewer, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I also
yeah,
wanted to show this,
older work.
right?
Yeah.
So because this when I started to look at your work, now I have a larger view of it. So it makes the current work more interesting for me, right? So
Mm.
because now I'm starting to think, okay, well, it's not those shapes have a history longer than I thought about. So how old is this? This is going way back.
It is, but like not that far, like
Okay.
2012. That was the first painting I made in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So this was the first, like, I moved to Philly, I got my studio ready. This was the first stretcher I built in my new studio.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so this painting is sort of sentimental, but I did a whole series of larger paintings of my then boyfriend, now husband,
Mhm.
in our home and in sort of these like domestic settings, and
Right.
um they're very moody and yeah,
Well, I still see the geometry, right? That secret
yeah.
geometry that you're putting in there. but
Mhm.
it's not only secret geometry, but it's it's interesting to see that you have the touch, you have the craft touch, you know what you're doing, right? And then to bring that into your current work, I think that's what makes it so successful. So the biggest question I really want to ask, and I was going to wait for later, but I want to do it right away. You
Yeah.
tell different stories in your work now than this kind of older work.
Mhm.
Was it a gradual change from this type of work to the newer, or was there like a clear break?
There was kind of a break. There was a period, I'm gonna say 2014 or 2015, I felt really closed in by making representational paintings, just observational representational paintings. And I felt like just, yeah, just like hedged in by it. And like I needed to spread out more and be able to do more invention. And I set about trying to find ways to make paintings that weren't so, just strict or ruled in by what I was doing before, but in a way that didn't feel arbitrary. Like anytime I had tried to make an abstract painting before, it was just like a bunch of random arbitrary marks. Like I just like didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to go
Right.
about making a painting any other way than making a observational representational painting. And um I just was determined to like figure out some way of doing something different because I was like bored and claustrophobic. And
Was there any catalysts to it, or was it a long time building kind of a thing, and then you
I
just
think it had, yeah, I think it had been building.
okay?
I think it had been building. I started to feel like I was just making the same painting over and over
Oh
again.
yeah, yeah. I
And I
hear
was like,
that a lot.
I was like, I can't go to the studio. Like, I can't, like, this is just so tedious. Like, why even keep painting if I'm just rehashing the same thing over
Right.
and over again? Um,
Well, that's why I was
and
talking about your storyline, right?
I,
And to me, I don't see the. I mean, I think a lot of people would just see the break in style, but I'm looking at the content of your work, and I
Mhm.
see that. I'd be curious to know when you did make that break, did you have
Mhm.
a number of fails before you started to find out about collaging works and
I
that
mean, I had like
found the
two
process?
years worth of paintings that I don't
Okay.
really show anybody.
All right.
Yeah.
I figured it was there. I needed to get that secret out of you somehow.
Oh
I
yeah, there's like several years worth of paintings that are weird transitional paintings. A lot of them live in my husband's studio. Just
okay. All
like,
right.
they're
So you
so weird and vulnerable. Yeah.
I know we don't even talk about this. I
No.
have we all have stuff like that. We don't talk about it. So
Yeah.
you mentioned I want to talk a little bit about your process. You had mentioned making collages. So are the collages also considered, do you consider those artworks, or are they, is that all just prep stuff for the painting?
I have exhibited them before. I have sold them before, but at this point in time, like I don't treat them nicely. I treat them like a tool
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
for the paintings. And it's the type of thing where like, if somebody really wanted to preserve them like an artifact in like a frame,
Mm-hmm.
like great, but I'm not gonna baby them
Mm-hmm.
like something that's saleable. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
they're part of the studio practice. They're functional, they're grimy, they're covered in like tape and
But that's what makes them
putz.
great, right? It's all that extra smudging and the footprints and everything on it. Uh,
Yeah, they're like really gnarly by the time I'm finished with
yeah,
the paintings. I've been like holding them and like,
right,
you know,
right. That's
um,
the good stuff.
yeah. And
We're
so I always thought it'd be really cool if someone came in here and was like, I think that we should like take all these gnarly collages and just, treat them like objects and
I think you're
maybe,
predicting your future.
I mean,
so,
maybe, yeah, it'd be cool, but who
so
knows?
let me just get in a little bit more about the the source materials that you're using to make the collages, to make the paintings. So
Yes.
you had mentioned that you're photographing yourself. Is it only just images that you've created, or are you also lifting other things, other sources, magazines or internet or anything like that? Or is it just all what you?
Yeah, so it used to be just my own photos, and like I feel like photography is just like too like high of a word for like these are just like crappy snapshots on my
Yeah.
phone, right? It used to be just that, and then also I would incorporate my own plein air paintings. So it used to be a combination of like my photos and my own paintings, and then I kind of ditched the paintings, and it was like just my own photos. And then it became photos and like these paint chips that I had custom made. And then I sort of started folding in photos that were from other places. Yeah. So some of them, not all of them, but some of them have like a tourism photo, like
Aw.
like a Orlando tourist department, their photography. I mean, I'm really interested in that, like both because of how it looks, but also just like conceptually, the idea of like, capitalizing on a place,
I can imagine your resource file must be huge or ever growing.
Yeah, it is. But I also, like, as you noticed, I recycle a lot of imagery.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's actually not that vast because a lot of the paintings are just recombinations of
So
the
if
same
you
imagery.
find a shape you really like, you just like, okay, I'm gonna use this, or I can reuse.
Oh, I have a pile of little cut pieces of paper shapes that I've used in like 10 paintings.
Yeah,
And they're just like the flimsiest little pieces of trash, and they're sacred. I
yeah.
use them all the
Right,
time.
right. They go
Yeah.
by the bedside or something. I
Yeah.
want to start ask a question I ask a lot of artists, which is in your childhood, and I know this sometimes makes artists feel like it's therapy, but I want to know, did you have sort of like any sort of epiphany moments as a kid when you like a first exposure to art that you still remember?
I don't. I just remember like always making, always drawing from like the time that I have memories.
You were always encouraged to do that?
Yeah, I was. It was, I mean, when I was really, really little, like, it was crayons and I would make weird sculptures out of like construction paper and tape.
Hmm.
Um, and then I just like was drawing and constantly drawing. And yeah, I just like as far back as memories go, I just have like compulsively wanted to make things.
Were
And
you, if you were always encouraged, at what point did you make the decision to just be an artist?
that one's trickier because, I think that, when you're younger and you're still really influenced by your parents, um, they saw art more as like a hobby thing. And there were a lot of things I was interested in. And so they were like, well, maybe you could like do something else and like do art as a hobby. And
Yeah,
like,
I hear that a lot.
yeah, and I totally get that. It's like it's it's a hard thing to go into professionally, but it just got to the point where like I really couldn't imagine doing anything else, and anything else just felt like I was just kind of kidding myself,
Oh,
for
well, I can imagine based on the older work that we showed that you were classically trained,
Mhm.
right? So then you have all that tools ready to go, which I think makes your current work so much more interesting because I can see the quality of the mark making that's in it. Do you
Mm.
when you're making that kind of work, how much of it, I'm curious, is experimentation versus just already having something and just making a larger version of it?
Mm.
Are there all is are you experimenting at all processes?
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the word experimentation on the larger canvases. I wouldn't say that I'm like, I mean, I guess you could call it experimentation. There's spontaneous moves. There's
Okay.
there's moves that I wasn't intending to make. But I actually think it's really important that the painting isn't just a blown up version of a predetermined image. Because like
Have
what's
you
the
ever gotten to the point where you've made a larger version and realized it doesn't work and then you alter it or you discard it?
all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So
Oh,
there is a little room there for experimentation even at the final stages.
oh yeah, and the collage is a map, but it's a starting point. I mean, a lot of the paintings are if you look at the painting in the original collage, like you can almost always tell that it came from the original collage, but they don't look the same.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're like in a
Right.
totally different orientation,
Hmm.
you
That's
know?
quite interesting. So I see your work as done in layers, especially with the idea of collaging. So that's to me, that's a very printmaker way of thinking about putting
Mhm.
images together. Have you ever done any printmaking?
Yeah, I love printmaking. I mean, I've only done a little bit. I took a class in college and I adored it. But yeah, I mean, it's the type of thing I've done and I love, but it's not something that I still do.
I'd love to see you really attack uh, printmaking. I'd love to see what would happen if you know,
Yeah, I've
obviously
been
I think
thinking of it.
screen printing is a big deal, but I would, like sort of deep bite etchings and stuff, different sort of marks would be really fascinating to see. Of course, most artists are like, I don't have the patience for that, right? Because they want to just paint and get it done with. And
Oh
so
no,
my
I have
printmaking
patience
could,
for that.
you
I
do?
feel
Okay.
I do. No, my work is so slow.
Okay.
It is. It's really, really slow. So I feel like if there's one thing I have, it's patience, actually.
Well, it,
Oh, I would love to get back into printmaking at some point if there's an opportunity to do so, like a residency or something.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. I would love to see that. If you start doing that, phone me. I want
I'll
to
hit
hear
you
it.
up.
I want to
Yeah.
see it. When you're in your studio and you're going to make something new, do you have sort of a go-to thing that sparks your creativity? As an example, like I have artists will say, I need to take a walk, or I need to read literature, or I need to be in nature. Is there anything that that you use as fodder to spark your creativity?
Uh, Hikes. Yeah. I mean, I think it's
Okay.
pretty unoriginal. It's like hiking and
That's
reading,
okay.
like all the other artists.
No, sometimes people are just like, no, I have to sit and meditate beforehand. Or the best one I ever heard was she needed to clean her studio. That's what got her thinking about creativity. So actually,
Mhm.
all artists are quite different.
Well, I
Um,
think also like I sort of have this ritual where I build all my own stretchers.
mm,
Um, so I think that's also part of it because it's like the time in the time that it takes to like, you know, build the stretchers, stretch the canvas, prep the canvas, all of that time is time that I'm
you're
chewing.
thinking, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is. I'm always fascinated by the process because
Yeah.
it can really give an insight on what the artist was thinking about.
Mhm.
So looking at your work, thinking about your work,
Mhm.
the imagery that you're using is very personal because
Mhm.
it's, you talked about where you live, Florida and Philadelphia, and sort of combining those two. Do you consider your works to be autobiographical in any sense? Or
Mhm.
is that not an aim?
It's tough because I'm trying to strike a balance between the paintings having a level that's very personal, but have them still be totally accessible to other viewers. Like, I have no interest in making work that's just like, it's just about me and it's just for me. Like, I want to do something that can connect with other people. But I
Okay.
have found that when you make work that is personal, it's almost like more effective at connecting with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm trying to make work that is like personal and authentic, but also like open enough that other people can see themselves in it or like connect with it in some way.
Do you have any hopes for what people will walk away from your work having?
I really don't want to control that.
Okay, so it's okay. Some artists
It's
do. Some
open.
artists are very specific, and some don't.
No, I mean, if anything, I think that my answer to that would be like there's certain conversations that I'm interested in starting. There's certain things that I'm interested in people thinking about, but like, you know, thinking about the relationship between human systems of control and the natural world, like thinking
Hmm.
about like the relationship between consumer culture and the natural world, like thinking about those things, sure, but like, I don't need somebody to agree with me. I don't need to tell somebody what to think, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, there's such a wide spectrum. Talking with so many artists lately, I found that some artists, when I ask them about their audiences, they don't think about it at all. And others want to totally be very specific about what they want to. And I love the difference in the way that the artists talk about that is, to me, it's fascinating. I've always
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
curious
sure.
about that. You had mentioned when you were a kid making sculptures out of paper and
Yeah.
whatnot. So have you ever worked as an artist as now in other
Mhm.
mediums like sculpture or even like poetry or dance or anything like that
Um,
as a medium?
not poetry or dance. I played music growing up.
Okay.
I played violin growing up and actually miss it tremendously. There's
Okay.
just like no time in my life, unfortunately. But I mean, there's time for anything that you make time for, but
Right.
there's other things that are priorities right now, I guess you should say. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like, oh my God, they're doing construction and my floor is vibrating. Sorry. It's
Mine
so
too. Ooh, I wonder
distracting.
if it's an earthquake.
Oh, yours is too?
Yeah.
Is this an earthquake?
Wow. My whole house just shook like it normally doesn't.
Mine still is a
A little
little
bit.
bit.
Yeah. Ooh, that was fun.
And it's going away now?
I think we're okay. That was crazy. Yeah. Woo.
Okay.
I'll
Earthquake
mark,
during the interview.
yeah, I'll mark that in the interview. So funny enough,
Oh,
we have time for just one last question.
okay.
All right. Question I ask a lot of artists: what does making art do for you?
Fills my soul.
Hmm.
I feel like so many of my answers sound cheesy, but I'm not trying to be. Like, it really is just like the most honest answer I can give. Like, when I don't make art, I just, I don't feel well. I don't, like I don't know. I don't feel like myself. I don't feel centered. I don't feel well. It's like so ingrained in who I am. It's like something I need to do to feel fulfilled, I think. It's like the act of doing it like is just fulfilling in and of itself. Like the journey is fulfilling,
Yeah.
I think.
It totally. I get it. It's like it absorbs you like an earthquake. It just it's it's everywhere. So that was fantastic. I want to thank you so much for coming by and talking with me today. I
Yeah.
really I have like 30 other questions I didn't get to ask you, so I got to go come see your work. But again, thank you so much for coming by today, and I want to
Thank you
thank
for
everybody. I want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch today. This is the earthquake edition of Art Show. We really appreciate all your help and support. Of course, liking and subscribing really helps Art Show. So we thank you. If you have any questions for Julia, feel free to put them in the comment section. If we can't answer them, we'll pass them along. So again, thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate it. And I hope to catch up with you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.